I travel a lot around the state, and I've met hundreds and thousands of new activists just in the last couple of years. So the question raised frequently by many people now is, are we experiencing a new political awakening? Or is it just that people are becoming more familiar with their political elite and discovering that they disgust us? Let's talk about that. Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. Now, I've oftentimes done stories where people will say, my word, our political leaders are just disgusting to me. They disgust us. Why do we have people that are this corrupt or incompetent or foolish in government? And that's a question that's very difficult to answer. I don't know if I have an easy answer for that, but sometimes it's the nature of man. Sometimes it's the fact that this is kind of eroded over time. And sometimes the truth is, if you look back in history, there's no real super secret special point in time that was nirvana back then either. There's always been, as long as people are in charge of government, there's always going to be problems with the people who are in charge. So the thing is, though, as people, and I think a lot of people are becoming new and involved in the political process, new activists to them, they're not too happy with what they see. But a large percentage of them realize we're going to have to deal with this one way or the other. Now, I really see this because I've been doing a lot of activist training all around the state, hundreds of people just in the last few months. And I always do a survey in the beginning and ask how many of you are brand new to activism. And what I do find is that in the last 7 or 8 events that I've been to, over 80% of the room is usually brand new to activism. A year ago, they weren't involved in the political process at all. And there's a variety of reasons why this is true, but I've found when I've also done some of the bigger rallies and attended and walked through the area and talked to people, I'm finding out, even in these big events, that a huge percentage of these people, probably north of 70%, are brand new to activism. They've never been involved in the political process. They've never been really involved in politics at all. And the question that comes up from those of us who have been more engaged and involved over the years, and of course from political scientists and just others, is just what is it that's driving people to become so engaged and so involved right now? And that's a great question, because most people, when you go out there in the community and you talk to your friends and family, you're going to find that most people really don't want to be involved in politics at all. It's kind of a taboo subject at the kitchen table, right? It's not the kind of thing that you talk about in a public setting. And unless you're a leftist, in which case you can go full woke and destroy people's lives for not agreeing with you. But other than those obnoxious few that are growing, unfortunately, it's more of them now than there used to be, generally people just avoided talking about politics. And so the average person would rather be playing video games, watching sports, or being involved in the day-to-day drama of life. And they don't care and they don't want to be involved in the political process. I don't blame them. That's how most of us are, and most of us would be, were it not for a variety of issues that I think are starting to impact a much larger percentage of the population, much bigger than anybody realizes, frankly. And for everybody that I talk to, it's usually a different story. The reason somebody has woken up and become aware of the problems in their community, it's very different. These are different stories. Some have described it as kind of like a red pill Matrix moment. If you haven't watched the first Matrix movie and you don't know what I'm talking about, you can watch it or get a little clip online and watch it, and you will understand what this means. But it's this idea that suddenly they wake up and realize that all these problems around them, they get a better sense that they weren't seeing the world as it actually is before, and now they've kind of woken up to some of these problems. For some people, it's just as simple as starting to see the decay that's going on in their communities. It could just be a radical increase in crime and just this kind of collapse of civil order. And it's very disconcerting to look around and see your community fall apart around you and to wonder why it's happening. What's going on here? How is it that things are getting this bad? I do find that the crime issue is driving a very high percentage of people, particularly people that are new to this country who've become U.S. citizens over the last 10 years, or people that generally were just working hard, kind of keeping their nose to the grindstone and not paying much attention until suddenly their car gets broken into and they find out the prosecutor's not going to do anything about it. In the greater metro areas and a lot of cities in our country right now, this explosion of homelessness and the complete absurd, ridiculous lack of a solution to the problem has been what's kind of triggered their interest and involvement in the political process. Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, all these cities, some just crazy, ridiculous things going on where massive homeless camps exist, and it appears that the government, no matter how much money they dump into it, in fact, the more money they dump into it, the worse it gets, and the problem doesn't get better, it just keeps getting worse, and it occupies the buses, and it's just creating this situation where people believe that the rule of law is no longer applicable. They see that there's political leadership that can get away with breaking the law, but then the law is not applied equally. So if you decided that you wanted to go out and riot and burn the cities down in a mostly peaceful protest in 2020, if you decided you wanted to destroy all the cities, $2 billion of property damage done, dozens and dozens of people murdered, take over square blocks of a city like Seattle, create these autonomous zones, commit all kinds of violence and arson and attacks, and pretty much have nothing happen to you. Pretty much be lionized, and in fact raise millions of dollars, which, come to find out, most of it's apparently being stolen, but nevertheless be treated one way. And most people are looking at this saying, how come this is allowed to occur in our cities? Why are they burning the places down, or why are they destroying the cities when if I went out and jaywalked, I'm going to get a ticket, And this, of course, really came to a head in Seattle, where you had arson fires and riots, and then they'd literally creating this no-go zone, kind of autonomous zone. I went up there and visited it myself. It was hard to believe, and yet nothing really happens to people who do something like that. And it's also looking at these political leadership and realizing that somebody like Susie Levine, pictured here in front of Governor Inslee in Washington State, would be allowed to lose $1 billion, supposedly to a Nigerian fraud scheme, and that's from the Unemployment Security Department. And then at the same time, a lot of people couldn't get their unemployment. Many people, even to this day, lost their unemployment, weren't able to get it, and yet she's the one that the Biden administration picks as the optimal person to run the federal agency. She goes back to Washington, D.C., and it turned out she was so bad they didn't even want her. But nevertheless, that's who they choose. That's who the political leadership chooses. And that made a lot of people wake up and wonder what's going on. Where I live in Washington State, King County is our biggest county, where Seattle's located, and the craziness of the mail-in voting system and all the bizarre outcomes that are being witnessed, where people will get 12 ballots at home, or all kinds of other issues, pop-up intimidation ballots, programs launched down in Seattle, things that the rest of the country hasn't even heard of yet, and observing it and recognizing there's really something wrong here. For some people, it's just the fact that after COVID kicked in and they realized that education decided to become Zoom, they suddenly had a chance to see what their teachers were actually teaching their kids, and teaching in that term being used loosely. And also the fact that when their kids did go back to school, they all had to be masked up, which actually didn't impress as many parents as I think the left and the elite leadership kind of thought it would. It wasn't that impressive to them. In Washington State alone, we had 41,000 families decide to pull their kids out of the public school system just in 1 year alone. And it looks like that trend's going to continue. The same things happen in Portland, and the same thing's happening around the country. People are realizing that the education system that they had just kind of presumed was proceeding along as it always had. Maybe it wasn't doing a great job, but it was still creating some level of literacy in the kids. And then they find out that it's actually far worse than they ever imagined. Sometimes this is what's driving people to become involved. But no matter what, when they look at the political leadership that exists, and whether that's nationally or in our state, nobody's very impressed. In fact, there's not much to be inspired about when you look at the goofballs that are in charge. And regardless, when they see that, there is a lot of concern that people raise out there as to what's going on in their community and how can they regain some sense of control over what's happening. They don't like the direction that it's going in. And of course, the virus was oftentimes used as an excuse to take away a lot of freedoms and liberties all throughout the country. And this is when you saw things like this, where people are saying, wait a second, what's actually going on here? Let's look behind the curtain. And when you pull back the curtain, it doesn't get better. It doesn't seem seem like things are running in a way that people always imagined government to be running when they were more apathetic and not paying attention. So that's part of the problem, because there is a real virus that does plague us. And it's more than COVID. What we're really seeing are things like the political leadership. And it turns out that they're far more damaging than the virus ever could be. And this is what's woken up, I think, a lot of people. And even when somebody like Governor Inslee says, hey, it's good to be king, and he feels very comfortable creating a permanent, never-ending state of emergency and locking people out of the Capitol, locking the Republicans out of the legislature, it raises a lot of questions. Or maybe it's the governor of Oregon, Lockdown Brown. She doesn't really care. She just ignores what the people say and makes mask mandates permanent and does all kinds of other silly and crazy things that are very destructive to the community, and people don't like that. But it's easy to make this a red-blue thing. It's easy to make this something about party politics. But this is truly far more than just partisan politics. Yes, the Democrats have been insane and have gone completely off the rails. They've decided that coddling criminals and releasing them on the streets is a good program for the community. And it's not, but that's what they've done. They've decided that it's far more important trying to spend, I've sent people to their meetings, and they'll spend 20 minutes trying to figure out everybody's pronoun in the beginning of the meeting, and then another 30 minutes arguing about who misgendered who. And that's obviously not probably a very sustainable way to run a political movement, and yet that's the path they've chosen. But that being said, it doesn't mean that I think the political leadership of the Republican Party is fully aware of what's going on out there as well either. Sure, they're predicting a red wave, and I think that that's probably true by default, because the Democrats are in charge of a lot of these places, that many voters are probably going to vote for whoever's challenging them. But that doesn't mean that the Republicans have done a great job necessarily reaching out to people and providing a better alternative. When you talk to individual people at the grassroots level, people that are brand new, that just got involved, yes, they'll talk partisan issues sometimes, but they're really more just concerned about the overall nature of the corruption and the incompetence that they believe that they see in the political process. It has become quite a mess. And so the more they look at it, the more they've decided there is really something wrong here, and we have to get involved to do something. We have to make a difference. There's just no choice. We have to engage. And that's why they're showing up at these workshops. I anticipate being in front of about 1,500 people over the span of the next 4 months. People who are serious about being activists and who want to get more engaged and involved. And the percentage of people who are brand new to the process, if it stays consistent with what I've seen so far, that's 80% or so of them that are brand new for the first time. And they're deciding that it's time to get involved and to be serious about taking back control, or at least having some control over their political leadership. It's more than just rallies. And the recognition and belief that they can't be stopped, that eventually, if enough people get together and decide to engage and support freedom and liberty and try to fix the problems that are so obviously in existence at every level of government, at our local school board, or city council, at our county commission level, certainly in our state legislature, and that's before you even get to the swamp and the nightmare of Washington, D.C., people are engaging. I don't know the political leadership of both parties, of either party, are aware of it. I know the Democrats are entirely clueless about this, but I also think that a lot of the political leaders in the Republican establishment have no idea what's coming either. And I don't think people are generally happy with either party, but they're definitely not going to be supporting the Democrats who've decided to go down this full woke crowd angle. That's not what they're looking for. They don't want to have criminals unleashed in their neighborhoods. They don't want their kids' education completely destroyed. But it'll be up to the Republicans, or whatever ends up kind of taking over that party, to provide a viable alternative. They need good people to choose on the ballot. If there's only one terrible option, that's going to make it very difficult for any political change to materialize. And of course, it's more than just elections and politics. It's also reaching out and into your community and making a difference and having an impact. Activists are coming out, people are engaging. There's nothing that's going to stop that. The political leadership seems to have, certainly of one party for sure, the Democrats, but even the Republicans, they seem to just be unaware of this groundswell and how significant it really is. I'm seeing it in Washington State, and I'm sure that if you're in another state watching this video, you're seeing it where you live as well. So if you care about freedom and liberty, get together with some of these new people, help get them organized, help get them involved. And it really is going to take a lot of us to make an impact and make a difference. But with this groundswell, whether it's a great awakening or whether it's a great disgust, it is definitely going on everywhere. And we have to recognize that it's happening. So if you want to learn more, please feel free to go to some of the links that I've made down below in the video description. You can also go to wethegovern.com. I encourage you to sign up for the free email newsletter or subscribe and share this video with others. And just remember that if you care about what's going on in your community and you want to get involved, ultimately it's up to you, because the future belongs to those who show up.